Laufeyson. Variant L1130, aka Loki Laufeyson, is charged with sequence violation 72089. How do you plead?
Madam, a god doesn't plead. Look, this has been a very enjoyable pantomime, but I'd like to go home now.
Are you guilty or not guilty, sir?
Guilty of being the god of mischief? Yes. Guilty of finding all this incredibly tedious? Yes. Guilty of a crime against the sacred timeline? Absolutely not. You have the wrong person.
Welcome to Shows What You Know, a Loki lecture. My name is Jim Scampoli, and I've seen every Disney Plus Marvel show.
My name's Jacob Burrows, and I didn't get through the Falcon one. But we're here. Let's not worry about the Falcon one. We're here to discuss Loki Season 1. Another one of these shows. They've really been pumping them out. I guess they were all in the pipeline. The timing just worked out. And also, you got to get them out so you can get all the references in all the other movies. It's a fucking ticking clock, the whole thing. It's like the sacred MCU timeline. You have to get the shows out at the right time so the characters can be in the right place for the next movie, etc., etc. So here we are, Loki Season 1.
And it's all, I mean, Loki Season 1, like the finale was a couple weeks ago. It's almost old news at this point, but we want to give people time to catch up. We don't want to drop any of the major spoilers, but it's out there. Let's discuss it. Now, Jacob Burrows, I feel like this show tickled your fancy or something. I can't believe you just like binged it all in like a day.
Yeah, I mean, it tickled my fancy a little bit. I think I did watch it all once it was all out, and I think that was a huge positive for me. Like I could see how there's a lot of problems with this show, don't get me wrong. I could see how I would be super annoyed with some episodes at the end. I'm like, okay. But I was really just fine to be zoned out. I found this show okay. It was another almost good show. And I don't think that daring to be dull is something I would ever applaud, but I don't know. I was just in the right brain space for the first couple episodes. I was happy to zone out and hang out in the Bureau of Balance or the RIPD. I mean, the ITV, the TVA. And I actually enjoyed the aesthetics and the slow pace of it, which I could see other people not enjoying at all. So you were following it along week to week, right?
No, I did not watch it week to week. And I actually came out on the other side thinking maybe it would have been better if I watched it week to week. And again, I'm going to sound negative. I'm not negative. I don't think the show's bad by any means. I do have a lot of issues with it. But I mean, I'm wearing a green shirt. I got the green accent lighting going right now. I'm repping Loki. So don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. But I don't know. I had some issues with it. I think and weirdly enough, it would come down to, I feel like it needed more episodes. Usually we're talking about these shows and we're like, oh my God, why do they have 10 episodes or something like that? But I feel like this show needed a little bit more. I mean, because they're playing with all this like time, funkiness and
wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, right?
Yes. And I just wish they had more time to play around with that, because they also built some of these relationships that I don't think are fully earned. But overall, I still like the characters. I still like that it's weird. I just wish that it was a bit better.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I'm taking a break to mess with my camera here because clearly not working with it. So give me a sec. I'm going to sort that out. Or maybe I'm not. Now I just unplugged it, messed it up, and there's a much worse image. Let's do this.
Oh, no.
Is this any better? Is it just as bad?
No, that's a little bit better.
Okay, that's the webcam on my camera.
We don't usually go live, and then we decided to go live, and everything fell apart. Everything just crashed and burned because people are telling me that. All right, no, I think we're better. We're good. We're in business.
Nice. See,
we're on the secret timeline, Jacob.
Yeah. Slick production, my guys. Thanks, Rizza in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Rizza.
Let's get back to Loki. So, you didn't love it, Jim. You didn't love it.
Yeah, and I feel bad because I know people get upset when they hear some of these discussions, and even if we get a little bit like critical, sometimes I mean we got a bad review because I mentioned something somewhat critical of Better Call Saul while discussing the Sopranos prequel. So I don't want to like hurt people's feelings or something if you like the show. I'm not saying it's bad. I just had some issues with it, and I'm saying I wanted more. I'm saying I wish there were more episodes. We'll get into that as we get into more specifics. I just say overall, I was really into it initially. I like that it's weird. I like that it has its own thing going. I just wish it's not like a. I guess my biggest criticism is like we watched a Fear Street trilogy of movies, and that was more like a TV show than Loki. Loki as a 6-hour movie, but like I don't know, it doesn't. I don't think it benefits from being a 6-hour movie or from being a 6-episode show. I wish it just would pick one and didn't feel like a movie stretched out over 6 hours.
Did you feel like it only just got started as we were like getting towards the end of the season? Because you said you were positive on it at first. I assumed people might not be too happy because it felt like a lot of the start of it was just people sitting around and talking. For me, that was totally saved by Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston just seeing them bounce off each other. And I made so many jokes about Mobius showing his strip. Even I got sick of it. But it worked for me, but I don't know, where were you at? Was it like towards the end of the season you were like, oh, this is barely getting started, or what?
A little of that. I mean, I feel like the whole show is people just sitting around talking, which I don't have a problem with, but I wish they weren't like walking and talking in front of like Star Wars prequel windows and stuff like that. Like it felt very much like Star Wars prequels because it's always walking down a hallway, but for no reason, there's all this shit going on in the background that's like the fakest looking nonsense you've ever seen, and it doesn't add much. I guess it gives you the idea of the scope that they're in this like futuristic world or whatever. But I mean, I don't want to seem like, oh, give me the action, like I'm a dummy, because I do like when you can have, characters, you could weave in exposition and make some interesting, conversations. But I don't know. It started to wane a bit, but you're right. Hiddleston and Owen Wilson are awesome. So it's super fun to watch them talk and go back and forth. So I can't complain about that too much. I will say, I mean, jumping around a bit, I don't feel that the actress that plays Sylvie, because she's like, the lady Loki or whatever, I don't feel like she brings the same like gravitas that like Hiddleston does. But she's supposed to be him, and it's because I'm not as familiar with her. Obviously, Hiddleston, we have all this backstory to play off of, but it didn't feel like it was hitting the same level when she was there.
Yeah, let's say I guess that's a spoiler. We usually say we're going to be going to spoilers, but whatever. No, I think it's fine. No one. I think people will listen to this after watching it, anyways. So. So, yeah, walking by and talking by Star Wars windows is a great description of it. I really like the aesthetic of like the fucking communist TVA with all their art on the walls and everything. But I do see where you're coming from as well. And on Lady Loki,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say I do love because as a comic reader, I never liked cosmic stories or like this type of stuff. But, it kind of started with Guardians. The way the MCU is, I like that their space cosmic time stuff has a weird retro vibe. It's not quite steampunk, obviously. It's like, I don't know, 80s punk or whatever, some bullshit like that. So I do like that. I like the aesthetics and the feel. So I'll give it that for sure. But I'm sorry, you continue.
Well, let's talk about Lady Loki or Sylvie. Like, I guess I think it's not necessarily the actress, but just the fact that the character is supposed to have been on the run all of her life. So she was born and then she's been living in apocalypses, and they make it seem like she has absolutely like no life experience at all except fighting and trying to stay alive, which kind of gives her not much to draw from, and she's only driven by her quest for revenge throughout the whole season. With like much like Loki, regular Loki, she's like starting to connect with humans a little bit, and I that's kind of good, but there's not really that much depth of relationships in the past that have molded her, and I think that makes her a little bit of a flat character. Do you think that's sort of the vibe you were getting as well?
Yeah, you're probably more correct than I will. I mean, I shouldn't take shots at the actress. I mean, as we get towards the end or whatever, she's definitely more of a presence. So it probably is more so just the character and the way it's like what she has to work with initially as we learn more about her. So I would think that's probably a bit more fair.
Yeah, but no, I totally agree at the same time, because she's thrown in and it's like I'm super cool. She's kind of like a Mary Sue almost at the very start because she's so great and cool. But then as soon as she's a good person or a main character, she's no longer strong and perfect and cool. And that actually brings me to like my main problem with the whole show is the nerfing of Loki. Like, not even talking about his powers being taken away or anything like that. Forget about all that. His lies are so bad in this whole show. Yeah. Like, he tells so many lies, and he does it all the time, and they're always like a fucking cartoon character over the top lying, and you can tell he's lying. And this is Loki just after the Avengers, and I know he gets swung around by the Hulk, and, he's not the most menacing villain. He's three-dimensional and everything, but, like, he does become an Avenger, basically, and this show gives you the impression that any of the Avengers could take him down, powers or no powers, just because he's a fucking idiot. And you know what? It's fine if you want to take him down a few pegs for the sake of character development, but just, like, the show keeps acting like his plotting is like ridiculous. Like, he's a clown, basically. They don't give him any smart stuff to do. Like, when he we can get into details, but did you feel the same way about this?
It didn't really jump out at me, but now that you say it, like, I couldn't really argue against it. I think what you're saying does make sense. I mean, I do like they're kind of playing with our expectations a bit, where it's always going to be so clear that he's lying or he's doing some sort of betrayal. Like, they're basically what they're doing is they are fast forwarding Avengers Loki to get him to be more like the Loki we know from Endgame, and then essentially a new version of that the likes of which we've never seen before. But yeah, I think you're right. But I think that also comes down to, this needed more. They needed a couple side quests, and I don't know, maybe people hate this. We've talked about this personally. I feel like a show like this would have benefited from a couple standalone Monster of the Week things, and you have little threads of, who's the person we're tracking, rather than like, who's the person we're tracking? Here's the person we're tracking, like an episode later. If this had a couple more side quests with the overall arc peppered in, and again, maybe what I'm talking about was impossible for them to do, whether it be to COVID or Tom Hiddleston is kind of a bigger star than typically you see on TV. Owen Wilson, I won't give him that credit. He's a TV star at this point. Nothing wrong with it, but he's relegated to TV. But I don't know. I feel like stuff like that would have helped this world. It would have helped build some of the relationships, because again, we're already talking spoilers, but there's a certain point where by the end, when Mobius, Owen Wilson, is kind of like, I thought you were my friend, man. And I was like, what? They were friendly. They were like kind of partners, but it wasn't to the extent where someone would be like, a friend betrayed me. You know what I mean? I didn't feel that.
What? But they were in Pompeii throwing shit around. That was fun, right? And they were bonding. No, I get what you're saying. Like, it's always like that conflict, right? Because when we have, back in the day when everything was Monster of the Week, we were like, yeah, we want more overarching plots and everything. And now we're like, is there ever a Monster of the Week? Are like even crime shows at this point are all like eight episode miniseries that are like super long and go into resolving one crime. There's no longer weekly stuff, basically because the format has changed so much. But you kind of miss it a little bit. You'd like the chance for the world to feel a bit more inhabited and alive, and like if there's a bad episode, it can be followed by a really good one in the sort of monster of the week setting and all of that. So I get where you're coming from for sure.
Well, and especially in this world that we're in, is like if anything lends itself to playing around. I mean, because it is. I don't really watch Doctor Who, but I've seen people bring up Doctor Who as a comparison. Yeah. But I mean, even something like Quantum Leap or something like they work for the TVA, where it's essentially they could go to infinite possibilities of universes. So if there's ever a show that would lend itself to a couple standalone episodes, but still having the overall story being hinted at or developed over time, it'd be something like this.
Yeah, and like the whole setup of the show is such a it presents so many fun opportunities, right? Of this week, we're going to deal with the problem that because of this particular Nexus event, and there's a lot of like explaining stuff through informational films and Loki reading manuals and archives and stuff. And I actually don't mind that as such, but I could see how all of that could have been just illustrated through actually going through an adventure or two in the short term and then getting to it. But yeah, as you said, it might have been impossible to have both. I kind of want my cake and I want to eat it too. I want to have the big story and then I want the small ones as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I mean, but you were saying like you were watching like Loki breakdowns and videos. So was that just because you knew we were discussing it, or did this show give you that itch that you wanted to go out there and see what everyone was reacting to?
No, I watched all sorts. Like I watched that on shows I don't like, and shows I like. Just want to hear people chatting about it. But yeah, just to kind of. Yeah, I guess it's I got that itch a little bit of wanting to hear a bit more, not necessarily going like, "Huh, what happened?" but more like, "What do people think of this?" Because I was like, it feels a bit different from on WandaVision. Everyone I've talked to is like, "Great show" until the last episode where it's kind of meh. And then Falcon, Winter Soldier, whatever, I've just not watched, so I don't really give a shit. And on this one, I just feel like it's more mixed. People are kind of different opinions. So I was just kind of interested in what the discourse was.
Sure. Well, I mean, all of these shows so far have had similar faults in a way. And again, I think it comes down to they're not really looking at it like a TV show. I mean, WandaVision obviously did because they got to play around with the actual just aspect of a TV show and, what sitcoms were and stuff like that. And then it just had to be something else. But Falcon and Winter Soldier, again, not bad either, but they just took a movie and they stretched it out over 8 hours. So it starts to get a little bit boring. And they don't have enough in between stuff to keep it fresh. And I think that's similar here with Loki. I feel like it would have benefited more from episodic stuff or embracing the TV or just keeping it as a mini series or something like that, just a 3-episode thing, because it does. I don't know. I feel like they stretched a little bit too much, because even when we get to things like, there's old Loki when they go to the cast off land or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Is when like he has this big heroic moment or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I don't care about this. But I mean, like I think I was supposed to care about this, and maybe other people did care about it. And there are theories as well that I don't know if you heard this great theory, but that actually is Endgame Loki, where, he tells that story that he projected himself dying and then he went and lived by himself on a world somewhere. It's like, oh, maybe that's actually what happened in Endgame. Okay. And then he got a big heroic ending against the Cloud Dog.
What about the gator? Are there gator theories? Because my theory is they just found a gator and put some horns on it. So are people big? Do they have theories about that?
No, I mean, Alligator Loki's fun, but it's clear they were going for a meme. Like they just knew it was going to be a goof or something like that. So like, I don't know. I don't have a criticism against it. And I'm not exactly like, oh, that's so great either.
Yeah. Well, that episode was kind of like, that's when we were getting into more of the episodic vibe, right? Because, or at least that episode is like, we're dipping into this world where there's a bunch of different Lokis all fighting for supremacy, and it felt very much like, you know, this was the episode where we got to see that world and those versions of characters bouncing up against each other. So that was kind of like what we'd expect from an episode, I guess. Did you want more of that? How were you feeling?
No, I mean,
did you like Kid Loki? Did you want to read all the fan fiction there's going to be about YA Loki, or what?
It's a fun idea, and it's also fun that the Lokis are the main survivors, because of course they are. Plus, it's a Loki show, and then it's fun when they all turn on each other. Like, there's a lot of fun stuff going on. But again, it's almost like what I'm saying. I keep harping on the same point. I just wanted a little bit more of that, like something similar to that, maybe a little bit more standalone.
Yeah. Well, if I can go back to the character of Loki for a sec, like, as I was saying, it felt like the development, like, if they wanted to like make him less powerful at the start for the sake of developing him, that's fine. And they do literally take away his powers. But the show kind of, I can't really put my finger on if it wants us to think he's smart or not, because it seems to do everything to make us think he's not smart. You know, we want him to be this character who's smart and plotting, has schemes within schemes, but like at the same time, the show takes the air out of his balloon all the time. And I think they could have just made him good at lying for a start. Like, the first episode, you know, it goes into how he's been lying to himself. He's always playing a part, and that's pretty interesting. But then they make him really bad at playing any part throughout. I feel like he's just overacting cartoonishly. The worst of which is in episode 3, like when him and Sylvie get stranded on an apocalypse planet or moon. And like, are we supposed to think that Loki is actually suicidal here? Because I don't feel that way, but like, it's the only explanation for his buck wild behavior, where he just gets drunk and breaks the one thing that could get them off the planet. Like, he knows he's in a show that they're only 3 episodes into and he's not gonna die because the planet's about to explode. But no, he breaks the thing that can get them off the planet, and then it's only because they get horny that they're sort of teleported away to safety. Like, it makes no sense, any of what he's doing, and it's constantly pointed out how dumb his plans are, and that is correct. And I'm just like, I would like to have a Loki who has a plan, even if it goes wrong. It kind of feels like they have to pick what they want to do with him a bit better.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, episode 3 to me was very dull, and it was the low point of the run. And it is when I started second guessing the show a bit. But yeah, I mean, I can't, like, it was, I don't even really remember some of the stuff that happened, because it was so clear, like, that, I mean, there was no danger or tension to me in what was going to happen. And I mean, I guess it is supposed to develop their I guess romance, because again, that's something else I'm a little bit critical of, is like the way they act. Like, it's a little bit underdeveloped as far as their relationship's concerned, similar to Mobius and Loki. Where at the end they're kind of acting like this is this grand thing, which I guess, to be fair, they do plant enough. I just wish it was expanded upon more. But yeah, that's because the first 2 episodes I was kind of with it. I was like, oh, this is cool. They're playing around with stuff. But then episode 3, I thought, really kind of hit the brakes on things. And I was like, damn, for only being 3 episodes in, it's weird to already start to see the seams. But that's what kind of got me a bit.
Yeah, I thought the apocalypse stuff was cool. What about as far as the overall mystery of the show? Because we've talked a lot about what we would like the show to have been instead, but what about what it actually is, which is them trying to figure out who's like the creators of the TVA, what is the reason behind it and everything. I felt like that would have worked better if we had a bit more like it's like immediately almost like, oh, this fascist organization is evil, crazy. These people who just delete folks from existence, they're not on the up and up. Insane.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask because it's mixed messages though, because the show, it's like, yeah, you're being lied to about, who the leaders are and what you're all about. But then ultimately, the man behind it all is supposed to be right.
Yeah.
So, what is the mixed message here as far as, like, is it good to have a fascist rule because for the greater, like, they are serving a greater good, right? Isn't that kind of where we end? Is that taking out the head of your fascist leader is essentially a bad thing?
Yeah, I know. Like, that's the... Like, it's kind of similar to just a random reference, Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series that ends the first book with them taking out basically the evil emperor, who then says something along the lines of, oh, what you've unleashed by doing this will be 1,000 times worse. And then in the next books, it kind of like just goes out of its way to justify this fascist rule where they had actual like slaves and everything. And you're like, this still seems like you could have done something better than what you're literally doing, deleting people out of existence. I feel like the argument at the end, it is designed to be, yes, you might technically say he's correct, or not technically, more like it's basically designed to appeal to Loki, because Loki says at the start about how freedom is a scourge and like people like having to make choices is basically pain, and I'm going to take that pain away by ruling everything. Like, even though he says he's a god of chaos or what have you, he's still like not that chaotic. He wants to bring order, I suppose. So it's meant to appeal to him, and that's kind of the conflict illustrated in him and Sylvie. I mean, I'd kill him, but and it's also like they could kill him and then also run it, because they could still be dictators.
Kinda, but also from like, I guess from a comics standpoint, I mean, again, not that I'm a big fan or have a lot of knowledge of Kang the Conqueror, but this is supposed to set up this villain, and in a way they're unleashing this villain. Now in the end, maybe it will be that they're correct, but at least in the time being, I mean, there's a season 2, so again, they could change it. At least in the time being, as far as what comics would tell us, is they're unleashing this great threat that could be even a greater threat than Thanos.
Are you talking about Kang, our boy Kang?
Yeah. And actually, before we get into that, I just see Max in the chat. I only watch YouTube clips of Disney Plus shows. I'm definitely intrigued with where Marvel's going, but he's very Marvel fatigued. I think that's probably a common thing. I mean, I know coming into this, that's the same thing I've talked about with other friends that watch all these movies and stuff. And we've kind of said it may have been a weird, I don't want to say blessing, because obviously the pandemic was, not a blessing, but maybe it's good that their things got put on hold a little bit, because coming out of Endgame, I mean, even that Spider-Man movie that came out right after, at least in my bubble, it's kind of forgotten or not looked upon that highly. Not that it's bad, but some of these shows and even Black Widow being pushed back a bit gives it more space, where at least it doesn't seem as overloaded, even though we're getting a bunch of shit. Like we just mentioned 3 shows that have had, we had a movie, we have 3 more Marvel movies and 2 more shows by the end of the year, because they have the Hawkeye show.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on.
Well, I was gonna say they have the Hawkeye show, and they have Miss Marvel, and then they also have in September they have Shang-Chi, and then in November they have the Eternals, and then in December they have Spider-Man. So
I've forgotten about all of that. I haven't been paying that close attention. The only one I really paid attention to in like relation to Loki, because I just looked into it, would be the next Doctor Strange that's coming like early next year is supposed to have Kang, which is the which is basically He Who Remains. Like, they don't say this in the show, but it's pretty obvious that Kang, the Conqueror, is going to be doing some conquering, and so we know that Loki is thrown out into a different parallel world where Kang seems to be in charge of the TVA. So it'll be interesting with the sort of release schedule. There's no way season 2 of this show is out before Doctor Strange. And the actor playing He Who Remains, who is also Kang, will play that character in the Doctor Strange film. So
I know he's definitely in Quantumania, Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I'm sure,
Oh, maybe I might actually be completely wrong. Sorry, I might be mixing those up.
Well, I bet you're not wrong, though. I mean, because Doctor Strange is called the Multiverse of Madness, so at the very least, I'm sure he's gonna like the same way that Thanos was in like the first Guardians a little bit, but he wasn't like the villain. But who knows? I mean, and even I'm sure this is playing into all the stuff that's supposed to happen with the new Spider-Man movie that comes out in December, because that's supposed to be playing with like bringing all the Spider-Man we know from the past 20 years together. And I'm sure this is like a part of that. I guess this is a stupid nitpick on my part, but it's like I look at it as like, okay, this is kind of fun way to break this out, but you almost didn't need it, because you could have just played around with what Avengers did in Endgame could have caused all the same stuff. And I guess to an extent that's still true, because what they did in Endgame is what sent Loki to the TVA and all that. So it's fun. I mean, I'm complaining about them giving us like this sprawling story. So I know I'm kind of wrong. Like, this is ambitious, cool shit that years ago you only would have dreamt of them attempting. So at the end of the day, I think we're coming out in a net positive.
Yeah, I mean, compared to Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? After the first Avengers came out, they made Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then it was like, Coulson's alive, but like, he's not really alive in the films, and it's completely own separate thing that they were doing, and they were doing Monster of the Week then, and it didn't work out that great either, so maybe I should stop asking them to do that.
That's true. Yeah,
but like, in comparison, like, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. felt like a completely separate thing from the film franchise, whereas these are woven into the cinematic universe, and in a way I'm like, yeah, you're right, we didn't necessarily need it. But also, I'm just glad. Well, I was about to say, I'm glad they're not making prequels. Never mind on the Black Widow front. But just generally speaking, like, it links up the stories in different mediums in a way that is a bit more interesting than we've seen in the past. And it's basically, even though I haven't like loved every aspect of WandaVision and this show, there's still a really ambitious attempt to try to tie television and movies together in the same way that they work. I mean, obviously we'd had film series that went on for a long time before, but the MCU is still kind of revolutionary. Everyone keeps trying to do the MCU for whatever franchise they're running and kind of expand it in different ways. And now that they've done it across so many films, they're trying to do it in televised form as well. And I think it's working a bit better. So compared to the older shows, but at the same time, a lot of people felt like Loki season 1 was doing more setting up than anything else, right? That it wasn't really that interesting in itself, but it was just kind of delivering backstory, whether that be for season 2 or for Doctor Strange or Ant-Man or whatever.
Well, going into like the reveal here at the end of what does he go by? He Who Must Not Be Named, and then
he
talks about He Who Remains. Yeah. Got Harry Potter on my brain. But he gives this backstory, but like, I'm a viewer and I know some of these things, so I know that actor Jonathan Majors is awesome. He's in a movie called The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which was a great fucking movie, and he's great in it. So I know him, and I know he's going to be a villain in an upcoming movie, so it's a cool reveal. But like, I assume you don't know that, so does this amount to anything when you're watching it, or do you find out these things after the fact and then you're like, oh, okay, or did you know?
No, I found out after the fact as usual. Like, I don't pay attention to any of that stuff. So yeah, for me it was just like, oh, it's a guy. I will admit I had a theory that the person behind the the ITV was ITV. I keep saying ITV, which is a channel here in Ireland. The TVA. I thought it was a Loki variant, right? I mean, though he claims to be a god of chaos or everything, he does that whole speech about wanting to control stuff. And basically, he's laying out how his philosophy is the same as that of the TVA. He just wants to be the one in charge. So that's why I thought in some capacity there'd be a Loki variant at the end of the whole thing. And then it was just some guy. And I was like, all right, that's fine. It was just kind of showing how his ideology is more aligned with that so that him and Sylvie could get into a big fight. I did enjoy He Who Remains as a character. I mean, even though I'm not familiar with him as an actor, he does a great job in this. And I'm like, great, cool to see more of him. It was kind of it was almost like, oh, shame that he's only in one episode, but then obviously variants of him are going to be coming and be the big villains and so on. So yeah, I'm here for it.
Yeah, but it just it doesn't really amount to a ton, but it does set up a lot apparently, which is fun. I guess the coolest reveal is that they are doing a season 2, so I think that's cool. And you know, in my experience, genre shows that are like ambitious like this, although clearly this is a different beast, but usually season 1 is always a little like shaky. So once they kind of get their bearings and they have a better idea of what they're going for, they get better in future seasons. This is a little different because it is tying into so many other pieces of media. So maybe that won't ring as true, but you know, I'm thinking of like Buffy and stuff like that. Like season 1's still good, but then once they get into season 2 and beyond, things just get better and better. So I hope this follows that trajectory. So, I mean, in the end, it's a cool show. I'm glad they made it, and it's like it's ambitious. I just wish they made a couple other choices, executed things a little bit differently, in my opinion.
Yeah. And as far as the sort of overall plot and mystery of trying to figure out what the deal was throughout the season, I did enjoy seeing the sort of space lizards, the 3 heads of the TVA. Like I literally couldn't stop laughing when they first appeared because they're so hammy and over the top and hokey. But that makes sense because they're built to be like figureheads. And they literally, one of them gets their head kicked off or whatever, and they're all robots. And I did like seeing them try to figure out what's going on. Though I will say, like, Loki's motivation in all of this is kind of like, we gotta do whatever. Like, I'm just, because he's just like, I want the power, I guess. Like, I want to take over the TVA. I'm scheming. Whereas Mobius, for example, like, his motivation is a lot more interesting, and when he starts confronting his boss in the TVA and everything, it actually has some weight because he's been basically stolen away from his life and had his memory wiped, and he's been their sort of unwilling servant unknowingly. So whereas Loki's just kind of been locked up with them for a month and is just really looking for more power and just stumbling across these things. And yeah, I guess Sylvie's a bit the same. She's her reasons are a bit less nuanced, honestly, than Mobius, because he has relationships with these people, like his boss and everything. Whereas Sylvie's just like, grr, I'm going to burn it all to the ground. So I am interested to see where they bring her character next season, you know, having accomplished her life goal of setting fire to the building. What's she going to do next? Are they going to do a bit more to develop her as a character or not?
Yeah. No, I think obviously the side characters will benefit the most of having another season. Because like you said, like Loki, I mean, we've been with Loki. We know his thing. We know he's a bad guy with a heart of gold. He's a a freak in the sheets. No, he's a freak in the streets, but he's sweet in the sheets. And we just want to bring that sweet to the streets, and we got to see that happen again. So we've already seen him be a bad guy and then come around. I guess they're setting this Loki up to be a little bit different, but it is more about the side characters that are a bit more interesting and have a bit more to go for an arc.
Yeah, although I do hope that this season they kind of, as you said, focused on, for as far as Loki's character is concerned, accelerating him into a more likable space. Given that we're just picking up after the Avengers, but I do feel like on all the issues I was mentioning before, I hope they sort of settle in on what they want him to be in the next season. Like, I would like to see him competent. I would rather have a competent main character that is foiled by actual, bad stuff than have a plot that's just mismanaged by the main character because he gets himself thrown off a train. Though I will say it was interesting to see him hear him sing that drinking song, because my brain really hurt there because I understood some of it and some of it I didn't understand, and I replayed it, and what he's singing is Norwegian. But if you don't know, I didn't know it was Norwegian, and it's so similar to Swedish that I was like, I understand this, but I don't understand it. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, it was a song in Norwegian he was singing. And I did love that the subtitles were like, sings in Asgardian. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're all fantasy elves to you.
Translate for us.
I had it before Loki. So like, it was written by a Norwegian songwriter. And I don't here it is. So essentially along the lines of the repeating bit is that in storm blackened mountains I wander alone. Over the glacier I make my way. In the apple garden stands the maiden fair and sings, "When will you come home?" So "Na kommer du hem?" And I like understood some of it, but then like my brain wasn't working, and I was like, did they actually do some sort of fake language? And yes, they did. It was Norwegian. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. But I just feel like, I feel like he could be dumb. We could have dumb Loki if you want, but then I feel like maybe also have him be powerful, kind of like Thor, because Thor's kind of dumb and powerful, right? But it would make more sense if he was smart and physically weak, like, Walter White or whatever. But he's neither. He's just dumb and weak, and he's been bumbling his way through the show. And granted, he gets his magic powers back and does a bit of fighting, but generally speaking, he's just kind of a fucking idiot, which I didn't love. But that was kind of my main gripe with it, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, how do you stand now as far as future Disney Plus shows? Are you the same? Are you been lukewarm? Are you psyched? Are you whatever?
Well, you said the next one's on Hawkeye, right? So I can't imagine a world, even in the whole multiverse, is anyone excited about that show, Jim? Who gives a shit about Hawkeye?
People give Hawkeye a bad rap. But, Hawkeye's just as interesting as Black Widow.
Yeah.
That's like a high bar. I know.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, if we're going to pretend Black Widow deserves a movie, why shouldn't Hawkeye get a show?
Well, I didn't watch that one either yet, so. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up for our coverage of Loki. It's it's interesting. They did some stuff. I really enjoyed the watching through it, but I was left after the last episode with a kind of like, okay, like I was really excited after episode 5 to see what would happen in episode 6. And episode 6 was fine. It was not bad, but it was also like, okay, it wasn't like, wow, what a great finale. And that was very much the same feeling from WandaVision. I was very excited to see how it would end, and then it did end, and I was like, okay, moving on.
Yeah. Well, we'll look for season 2. I mean, Hawkeye's going to kick ass. I'm sure Loki will pop up, and Alligator Loki and Alligator Hawkeye will have a thing. So I guess if I'm honest, I've gotten less interested as these shows have gone on, but I'm still looking forward to them, if that makes sense. I'm a hypocrite.
Okay, great. I guess last question, as far as like this seems to be setting the tone, right? As we were saying with what's going to happen in Spider-Man, what's going to happen in Doctor Strange and Ant-Man, like this is setting the tone a lot for the next big phase of what's happening in Marvel, like introducing all the multiversal stuff, and we're sort of seeing it here as a central theme for the first time, I guess. So as far as that versus the time travel of our previous well, not phase. What do they call it? The whole thing, the Endgame saga or whatever. That
Well,
time travel was like the thing of that, and now we're in sort of multiverse territory. So, how do you feel about that generally? Because generally, I feel positive, but I also feel like, much like time travel, it's pretty risky in potentially resetting the stakes to absolutely zero, because anyone could just jump in from another dimension and be like, I'm the same, I'm back, I died, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely opens up a weird can of worms. I mean, it is a logical step to open things up as far as if they want to play around with these characters and bring in different versions of them, which it seems like that's what they want to do. I mean, it's a staple of comics. I mean,
Yeah.
If anything, let's get weird. So if they want to get weird, let's get weird.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a great point to end it on. So thanks for listening, everyone. You can find all of our coverage of various television shows at showswhatyouknow.com. And we've discussed every episode of The Sopranos. We're making up our own TV shows in Blank Meets Blank for various multiverses where we're television producers, rich and famous. So check that out. And beyond that, there's nothing else to say. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you in another multiverse.
But who are you? Who are you? Who's this guy?
I get it.
That's my joke. That's my Loki joke. We'll see you next time.